Hey everybody, Jane here, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. Now, I will admit, this was actually quite a disappointing read for me. I fully expected to love this book, and I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. So this book follows our main character, Cussie, and it is told in her perspective. And she is a bookwoman. Her job is to take her pack mule up the mountains in Kentucky and get books to patrons who live far away and can't get to the library. I guess that was an initiative started by the Roosevelts, Franklin and Eleanor, to try to A, help people living in poverty in Kentucky, and B, to create a more educated people. Books. Having access to books is a good thing in general. Other issues in the story that it talks about, of course, is life in Kentucky at the time and the extreme poverty of that era, especially for Kentuckians. And our main character, Cussie, she has a medical condition that turns her skin blue. It is a rare genetic condition, and unfortunately, she encounters a lot of prejudices because of her medical condition. This book, if you recall, earlier this year, I read a book called Lipstick in Afghanistan. This book and the things I didn't love about it are a pretty good comparison. This had such good ideas and such important things it wanted to talk about, but it almost tried too hard to do that, and we didn't have a lot of plot. There wasn't a lot of plot in this book at all, but there was so much stuff happening. I will say I did not love the way this book started. I felt like in some ways it started maybe at the wrong time. And what I mean by that, and I don't think this is a spoiler because this is first couple chapters of this book. The first thing that we have happen is Cussie's father tells her she has to get married. He has now put out basically a dowry, saying that if somebody marries her, he will give them a piece of land. And I guess land's hard to come by, and her dad, for some reason, is wealthy enough to have this land, and he really wants her to be married. And she's saying, no, I've got this good job, and it pays, and if I get married, I will lose my job because this job is for single ladies. And he's telling her, well, I'm not in great health because he's a coal miner, and I want to see you married and settled before I die. Her mother has passed away several years ago, and Cussie does not particularly want to get married. However, and she doesn't have a lot of prospects because of this medical condition she has. The book starts basically with her getting married and the guy being very abusive and the guy dying. And this was kind of one of those situations where I had barely gotten a feel for Cussie. I barely got a feel for this world before all that happened, and it was really fast and really boom. And because of some of the stuff that happens at the end of the book, I got why that needed to be there, but I felt like I would have liked to know Cussie more because, what happened was terrible, but it's almost like being introduced to somebody and they tell you the very worst thing that has ever happened to them in their lives. And you're like, whoa, we just met. And so I kind of felt like that was too much from the start. Plus the abuse really threw me off and I almost stopped reading. I was really like, oh, this is not okay. But it was also very quick. We don't get a lot of that. But the abuse is so severe that it leaves her permanently hearing impaired a little bit. So then after that, her father decides she doesn't have to be married. She can continue being the bookwoman. And we just have kind of a lot of her walking around and handing out books and kind of an exploration of Kentucky life. And I felt that part of the book reminded me a lot of the book Christie, which is about a teacher that goes to, I believe, Tennessee, Appalachian, Tennessee, and is struggling with the customs and the poverty. However, one of the challenges we have is that Cussie is a Kentuckian. So many of the questions I had about the people in this book and the problems they were having are not well answered by Cussie because she is one of them. And she doesn't have these questions. This is just the way it is. In this book, there are so many people suffering from basically starvation, and I didn't understand why. Because we're told, this book is a lot of contrast, and food in particular is a contrast in this book. We are told by Cussie that giving gifts of food is one of the most kind things people can do because food is so scarce. And yet, at one point in the book, there's a pie baking contest. I'm like, wait a second, there's a pie baking contest, but you have people who are literally starving to death in this book. And yet your town is having a pie baking contest. And that didn't, I don't know. That was just one of the many contradictions in this book. Or we are told by one character that there's all these roots that grow wild that people can eat. And we're also told at one point that there is wildlife. There is turtles. Somebody makes turtle soup. Cussie's dad goes and hunts rabbit. There's all this food available, it seems, and yet people are dying of starvation. And I didn't really understand the why. These people who are literally starving are not out hunting food, but they're instead washing their floors, worried about putting out their laundry. And I guess I really didn't understand that. That seemed weird to me, that you have this food seemingly available and nobody's going and getting it. Earlier this year, I read Stay Alive, which was a book about the Donner Party. And the people in the Donner Party, it is snow up to your ears, and they are eating each other. They're eating their bootlaces and all this stuff to try not to starve to death. And then you have these people in Troublesome Creek who there's roots, there's animals to hunt. I believe there's one scene where they talk about in a house where people are starving to death, there are hazelnuts that got eaten by the mice. And I'm sitting here going, if you have all this food or the access to food, why are people not eating it? Why is starvation such an issue when we have the turtles for turtle soup, when we have some people doing a pie baking contest, when we have these roots that grow wild and are edible, and when we have these animals that you can catch and kill and save the parts to. We have all of these things, and yet people are literally dying of starvation. And I didn't really understand that part of the book. And I think because Cussie is so a part of the story, she never takes a step back and can say why this is. So there's a lot of things in this book that felt like that, where it's like, I don't really understand why you're saying this, but there's also this other stuff. Again, I don't doubt that people in Kentucky during the Great Depression or around that time period were starving, but I don't understand why when we have natural resources. You do get kind of some hints about it. For instance, that a lot of the coal miners are getting their resources at the store, and that's keeping them very in debt. But still, I mean, I don't understand why these women are so obsessed with their floors and their bed linen if their children are dying of starvation. So that was a huge sticking point for me. It really bothered me. It's been weeks since I read this book and I'm still angry. I'm like, I want to know why they were starving to death when there's roots and there's stuff you can eat. Why are you starving? So Cussie, this book has a lot of poverty because Cussie's going around to some of the poorest people and, trying to help them, or at the very least educate them. She does also have books in some cases that she gives them on things like trapping and things to help them have resources. So that was kind of cool. Another thing that is talked about in this book a lot is her medical condition. At one point, the doctor of the town wants to take Cussie to learn more about her medical condition to see if he can find a cure for her. I had a real hard time with that. Not her wanting to get treatment, but the doctor basically kidnaps her and then takes her to this place. And even though Cussie's been through all the things she has, they literally, like, examine her against her will in a way that these days we would call assault. It was crazy. There's so much violence against women in this book, and I mean Cussie in particular. That's another thing that really bothered me. It felt like there's one decent man there's like three decent men in this book. You have the guy that she's interested in, and who's interested in her. There's a little like side plot romance. You have a guy who works in a tower trying to make sure that, fires don't start, and if they do, they can get water to it so that they don't have massive forest fires. And then kind of Cussie's dad. Like, Cussie's dad obviously forces her into a terrible marriage, but, he's kind of a mostly redeemable character. We know he meant well, even if he was dumb and the things he did were wrong. But it seems like most of the other guys in this book are awful. I cannot count the amount of times Cussie is mistreated and assaulted by men, which I believe was probably meant to be a commentary on the treatment of women in Appalachia during this time period. But again, this book just tries to do so much, and there's just no real plot. There were some points in the book that I did enjoy, but then especially I did not at all like the first maybe quarter of the book. Once we got a little past that, I was interested, but then we had some crazy stuff happen near the end of the book, and the ending just was really abrupt, and I hated the ending of this book. So I would say, I hated the beginning, I hated the ending. Some of the middle was good, and some of it was really boring. And a lot of it, I was just sitting there going, are we doing anything? What are we doing? What story are you telling me? I have no plot. So this book, if you don't mind books that have no plots, you might actually very much enjoy this. This is very much a book about the time period and the setting. Appalachia during the Great Depression. If that is in your boxes that you want ticked and you don't mind no plot, you might really enjoy this book. I liked certain parts of this book. I liked certain moments in this book, but as a whole, I did not like this book. And one of my really good friend, Christina, we did not buddy read it, but she'd read it before me, and she had very similar feelings. She said, I read the book, and by the end, I wasn't sure if I liked it or if I didn't like it. I can say that the good parts were good enough that I couldn't give it less than a 3, which for me, a 3 is an average book. A 3 is this book. I didn't see any major flaws that make it bad to read, although the lack of a plot, But I felt like the good parts in this book were good enough that I didn't want to go beneath a 3 in my rating, because the things that didn't work, like there not being a plot or much of a plot, that didn't take away from the good moments in this book and the things that it was trying to do. I was intrigued by the setting. I did get a little bit of Christy vibes from it, although, as I said, I don't think Cussie, because she is a Kentuckian, can answer a lot of the questions I have, whereas in the book Christy, because Christy is an outsider, she questions along with us, well, why is this happening? Because, she's not from there. And Cussie is not as equipped to answer that question as, an outsider would be. So, yeah, this book, overall, didn't love it. But if you don't mind a lack of a plot and you are more interested in the setting, you might very well enjoy this. It had so many important things it wanted to talk about, that I thought that was almost too much. And then on top of it, I felt really frustrated by all the violence against women. I felt really frustrated by just, at times the book didn't seem like it was going anywhere. Yeah. The best thing about this book was Cussie and kind of her trying to figure out who she was and who she wanted to be and who she had the potential to be, and trying to help people who were worse off than her. I think she is a very likable character, even if she's likable as far as she's a good person. I didn't necessarily connect to her. She's not somebody I want to hang out with and have coffee with, but I did think she was a decent person, and I didn't dislike her at all. I felt very sorry for her throughout this book. So those are my thoughts on the book Woman of Troublesome Creek. If you've read it, what did you think of it? I would love to hear your comments below. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, hit like. My contact information is below. Also below in that information are links to my books, both on Amazon and Smashwords. I am a writer. I write mostly romance. If you are in Kindle Unlimited, I have, I think, 4 books that are in the Kindle Unlimited program, so you can read them for free. If you are not in Kindle Unlimited and would still like to check out my books, they are available Smashwords, Kobo, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, basically anywhere books are sold. Often I put them up for free giveaways on different sites, so keep your eyes peeled for those. I will talk to you later. This has been Jane. Bye.